Good morning. How do you do? You're good, very good. It's interesting to get a bunch of people gather in a room like this to talk about network constitutions. It's difficult when you prepare for this to guess the room and understand the room, because you could be coming from different places. You could be deeply involved in a governance system, or you could say, I've heard about it, it's interesting, something democracy. So let's see if we're able to get you together. The question is, do we need network constitutions? And you could be either on the side where you say, I've been involved in governance and I see clear reasons why we should have constitutions. You could also say, we can let everything happen, or it's not really necessary, it's mind games and so on. So I'm going to share my thoughts and insights with you today. And I want to start with a little bit of a thought experiment, or let's say a little bit of a warm-up. And the question is, does Bitcoin have a constitution? And I would say one way to answer this is that you say, no, Bitcoin has a maxed cap of 21 million Bitcoin. The highest block wins. We have proof of work to select the next node that creates a block. And it's basically all defined in a technical consensus, and you will never need to change anything about that. But that is not the case. Bitcoin is upgrading, Bitcoin is evolving. There was even an instance once where Bitcoin stalled in 2010, and Satoshi had to push a fix and basically get all the miners to upgrade. So what we can see from this example of Bitcoin upgrading, not only through Satoshi, but also through technical upgrades, where we had the SegWit upgrade that enabled Lightning, or the Taproot upgrade 1-2 years ago, that Bitcoin is upgrading and there is a form of governance happening, even in Bitcoin. And so there's not only the technical consensus, but there is also a social consensus around it. And now we can say, okay, there is some form of governance happening, but do we have a constitution? And I would argue yes, because sometimes when you think about constitutions, we think about this written document. But that is only one form of a constitution. Constitutions can have an unwritten form, they can have a written form, or even a codified form. And in the form of Bitcoin, you might argue the codified form is the actual code that is running and that constitutes how the network is operating. You have a written form, you have the Bitcoin white paper, you have the Bitcoin improvement proposals that became accepted and got integrated into the code. So there is a written form that has constitutional elements, and there is even unwritten forms. The way that Bitcoin is upgrading is happening via signal voting. So we're basically like spamming some kind of unused data in a Bitcoin block to signal that we want to do an upgrade. This form of upgrade is not written down in any formalized version. It's just how the Bitcoin network agreed to operate. So what we can see here is that Bitcoin has governance and Bitcoin has constitution. So the question of, do we need network constitutions is a little bit, it's not the right question, because we see there is constitutions. So we need to understand, we just need to get a little bit into this and understand constitutions. So going away from Bitcoin into more complex systems, in Ethereum, in Polkadot, in Cardano, in Cosmos, Avalanche, Solana, we see a complexity explosion. We see a complexity explosion in terms of what the technology can do, what the protocol and the logic can do. And this implies that we need to also be able to govern the system properly. If Bitcoin has governance, then how do you do Ethereum governance? In the case of Ethereum, the answer is that it's having a technocratic government. So the core developers are coming together from different teams and deciding how they move forward. But when it comes to governance, and then let's say the third generation blockchains, like all the other ones, they are becoming more sophisticated in terms of governance. They are more explicit about adding governance on top. But quite often it makes the impression that governance is basically, you say, we have a protocol, and then we slap a forum on it where we can post improvement proposals, and then we have some kind of on-chain voting. And if you think a little bit about it, this is not fit to manage the complexity. The growing complexity cannot just be managed by slapping a tool on it and hoping that it works. One area where we're discovering is misalignment. So you have different kinds of stakeholders, and they have different ideas about what are the proper next steps, and we have a hard time getting them into order. I'm usually saying one of the worst cases is if we have a voting result like this, because it basically splits the community. And then this is a very good solution where you say, okay, we have a winner, but essentially 10% of the losers might decide, okay, this is not for me, we need to go away. I mean, sometimes you need the hard decisions, but can we find better ways for alignment? And the third thing is that if you look into this governed system, into these governance systems, politics is eating people. So I had this conversation yesterday. I was totally stressed out in the last 6 weeks because I had just did too much work and I did get involved in too much governance work. And I tried to discover what the problem, like what is the biggest thing where I can fix my own life right now. And I discovered I'm chronically online. I wake up and I check out Telegram and see what's new. And I go to sleep when I fall asleep because I can no longer keep my phone open. So politics is eating people. If we have a system that is taking too much energy from the people, they just drop off. And on the other hand, we need to recruit people into the system. It's not just slapping on a governance form and a voting mechanism. Governance in politics is a culture, it's a process, it's a complex social system that we need to support, right? So how do we maintain our sanity and our mental health in such a system? And how do we recruit people into the system that are happily trying to participate? So we have lots of DAOs, little purpose, unaligned systems, we're hitting scaling limits, and we have few competent and educated people. Scaling limits. If you have a hard time governing the system because you're wasting a lot of energy left and right, you have a hard time scaling. And we will go a little bit into this. So 3 scaling bottlenecks that we just discussed: complexity, alignment, and participants. And I'm referring to this as scaling bottlenecks because the scaling of the system is also limited by the power to govern it. So I want to reframe the initial question a little bit. It's not about do we need network constitutions, but I want to make a case for why should we have network constitutions. And to understand this, I think one problem that we have is we're missing some of the common language. We're missing some of the common mental models because we made so much experiences now with how we're running DAOs and how we're running governance. And what we discover is the initial explanational models were not enough. We're now introducing politics, and it's maybe corporate politics, or maybe it reminds us of nation-state politics. But we're missing the experience because most of us are nerds or technical people or whatever. We come from different backgrounds. Hello. And we're not educated in politics. We're not educated in how to do the processes. And we don't want to do exactly traditional politics. We want to do politics that is fit for our system and helps us to properly develop it. So let's sharpen these understandings a little bit of how we understand those terms. I want to go into what is a DAO, what is governance, and what is a constitution. And I summarize it as a DAO is a tool to achieve a purpose. Governance is a consensus building and execution mechanism. And a constitution is a reflection of consensus to create alignment. We'll dive a little bit into this to make it understandable. So what is a DAO? A DAO, I don't know, it was 2016 or sometime around like this when the first DAO was built. The interesting thing about the DAO is it executes on-chain, it has some logic attached to it. And this was the original idea, an organization that is fully run by code. What we discover over time is that humans are still in the picture, right? We don't have fully automated programs on-chain that just live by themselves. I mean, these are sort of protocols, right? But a DAO can be more than that. And this is why if you talk about DAOs today, typically you consider that humans are involved in process. So this is why I would argue a DAO is a hybrid of humans and machines. With machines we say smart contracts or programs or whatever. It's an intersection where these two parties are working together. And the humans cannot decide everything because the protocol, the machine, decides some of the things from the logic that is programmed into it. And DAOs are a tool. DAOs is basically just a set of programming instructions, right? So it is a tool that allows us to do something. And I think this is the beauty of Web3. This is why I think it's beautiful. We're no longer talking about crypto and blockchain, but we're also talking about Web3 as a dedicated movement that comes out of crypto and blockchain. But that refers to this idea of that we can build new social constructions that we can fill then with purpose, because a tool by itself is not worth anything. The idea is, what do we want to use the tool for? And DAOs are a great vehicle because, first of all, typically they have a treasury, which means we can put money together in a pot and then we can decide what to do with the money. We can use them to organize our thinking and come up with concepts of how we want to do stuff together. I see three values. This is my personal opinion, my observations from the previous days. Feel free to expand on it or come up with something better. I see that three values need to be given in a DAO, or three properties need to be given, or principles need to be adhered to, which are resilience, relevance, and reliability. Resilience is the idea that if the protocol is attacked, and we're considering an adversarial environment where there's lots of enemies around, if a protocol is attacked or is experiencing a black swan event, it needs to be able to survive. So one of the highest goals later on with governance and with constructing a DAO is to make it able to survive even hard attacks or any kind of adversarial conditions. It needs to gain relevance. If you build the greatest protocol in the world, but no one uses it except you and your 5 friends, I mean, maybe you're happy. Most protocols strive to become adopted and be used by the world. If you build a tool, you want it to be useful to people. So relevance is important. And then there is reliability. If your DAO is changing all the time and transforming and morphing, other DAOs and other actors in the ecosystem have a hard time trusting you or considering to work with you, because they do not know if the shape you're having today is the shape you're having tomorrow. The way you interact today is the way you interact tomorrow. So some kind of reliability is necessary. And so one easy way to just keep it in mind is Web3 is all about creating systems for competition and collaboration, adversarial environments, and voluntary participation. And the voluntary participation part is crucial because as a member of a nation state, I cannot choose my rights and responsibilities, right? They are imposed on me. Maybe I can choose to change the state, but I live in a state and I have certain rights and responsibilities imposed on me. It's not the case with DAOs, because participation is voluntarily. And so this changes the game a little bit, because if something is voluntary, it needs to have good consensus. People need to agree to participate in it. They need to understand the rules. They need to say, this is a good thing, I want to be part of that. So this is where governance comes into the picture. So governance is a meta protocol, if we want to get nerdy. So you have a protocol, let's say, Polkadot, where I come from. And then governance is a meta protocol. It's a protocol about how we do changes to the actual protocol, right? So it's a way to negotiate this. And maybe a more interesting way to phrase it, governance is the brain of a DAO. If you have a DAO, it's an organization. It's like an organism, right? And so it wants to thrive, it wants to do good. But what that means is it is embedded in an environment with other organizations that are also maybe competing for the same market or to build this, to offer the same solutions. So the thing that makes us humans dominant on the planet is that we have big brains with which we can do big stuff. And it's the same relationship. So a brain to a human is like governance to a DAO. Governance is the thing that enables us to direct and steer the thing, to set up goals and push it into a certain direction, make sure with the limited resources we have, we make the right decisions about which moves to do next. And also, if we consider that even if it's like a hive mind, because the interesting part about decentralized governance is that it's decentralized. It's not like traditional governance. You can trust that if you're working on some things, some people elsewhere in the ecosystem are working on things that you're not aware of and that have not been communicated. So it's a different way about how you think about the whole system. And it's weird to trust a hive mind in certain regards, but it's its own approach of thinking about the whole thing. So why should we have governance? Why should we have good governance? Because it's the way to beat the competition. And I envy builders that are just in a position where they can build and say, maybe it gets used, maybe it doesn't get used. But I would say overall, the big job of Web3 is to bring utility to the real world and to bring people good stuff, applications that they can use, helping us to build our own systems of sovereignty and so on. And so if you build a product that has governance, it needs to have good organization. And so the question is how we build this. One observation that we can make is that one concept that we can borrow from traditional politics is that of legislative and executive. So governance is making a decision, and then this is the boundary, and then this decision gets executed. So the legislative part is, what do we want to do? And how do we come to an agreement of this? How do we build our mechanisms to mediate our ideas, have a marketplace of ideas, and then decide on the best solution? The legislative is we made the decision of what we want to do, and then we need to execute it. So legislative is about effectiveness. We want to achieve certain goals. And executive is about efficiency. How do we, with the least amount of effort, can make this happen? Now this throws up the question, this is a serious question that I have, I don't have the answer yet. We're having discussions. Is there a judicial branch, right? Is it courts? Is it just doing the auditing, right? So if you want to have a conversation around this topic, I'm very open to this. And then this is what I call the Forcrazies. So typically, forms of government is for example, you can have a democracy. And so I'm currently identifying four types of crazies of forms of government or forces that are working with governance. So I call them plutocracy, technocracy, meritocracy, and democracy. And what I mean by that is, so plutocracy is one token, one vote. Technocracy is developers deciding on how to move stuff forward. And so maybe they're not involving other stakeholders. They're just saying, this is a good thing, we're building this, and then it happens. So technocracy is a thing. Meritocracy is a thing in the terms of that if you have a system that values people that are providing value, you are incentivizing a healthy system. And so healthy governances are those where people contribute value and they get properly rewarded. And the other way around, people that don't provide proper value don't get properly rewarded, ideally. And then you have democratic elements in the form that people talk and participate, and they direct this in form of their sentiment. If you see a certain sentiment on Twitter or on the socials, it also influences how you perceive the whole thing. So everyone can participate in the conversation, even if not everyone has equal weight. But people that contribute to the conversation still shape how the outcome of the whole thing is. If we discuss, should we reduce inflation to 8% or 5%, a lot of this is also influenced by how much are people talking about the certain things. Or do they come up with good ideas? Good. So we have a DAO, which we understand as a system that fulfills a certain purpose, and then we have governance, which is the brain of the whole thing. And now let's circle back to the original question. Constitution. What is it? Why do we need it? And I want to make 3 points here. A constitution is a plan to manage complexity. So a DAO and everything in Web3 that happens is super complex because stuff happens everywhere at the same time. There are smart contracts or chains that are interacting with each other. And everything is highly complex. And how you do governance can be highly complex because you can have a million different ideas to propose. Right? So, but how do we decide which ideas do we discuss and not discuss? And maybe can we delegate some of the ideas to certain entities because they're better equipped with coming up with the solutions? So we have a very complex space, similar to how we humans as a life form are very complex. So what is our solution as animals? We build out organs. So for example, if we want to take care of the poison, we have an organ of that. If we want to take care of the food, we have an organ for that. If we want to take care of air, we have an organ for that, or even multiple. So the thing is, we build out organs. We manage complexity by building out structures and processes. And a constitution is a way to describe the system and describe how it is building out its structure and processes. So it's a plan to manage complexity and make it manageable. It's a surface to mediate conflicts. So if we have a conflict and we have a constitution, we can go to the constitution and ask, okay, what does the constitution say? And the constitution is basically the written down form of everything we agreed on in the past, right? And so we can look at the constitution and maybe this helps us mediate our conflict because maybe we see one person is right, or it gives you an instruction on how to resolve the conflict. And if not, you find another way. But it's a surface to mediate conflict in the way that it gives you a point of contact where you can go to and say, okay, this is something that can help us in this regard. And it's an onboarding tool for new participants. If you're joining a system and you're equipped with a brain that is keen to learn new things and read, and this thing has a constitution, and say, okay, this governance is interesting, I would like to learn more about this. And then you're confronted with a constitution or some form of written code, and you can read it and you can say, this is how the thing works. So it's an onboarding tool because it makes it easier for you to join the system and understand how it is working. And so, by pure coincidence, this matches the three scaling bottlenecks I mentioned in the beginning, which are complexity, alignment, and participants. So we manage complexity, and managing complexity allows us to do more complex things and to reach out further into the world, which allows us to scale. It's about alignment because it allows you to have a process that mediates conflict so that you can resolve it and figure out the general direction in which you want to move the whole ecosystem. And it's a way to onboard participants because it gives you a reliable, predictable system of how everything works, roughly, so that you can orient around this. So coming back to the original question, why should we have network constitutions? I wrote this down yesterday as it's a reflection of consensus. So the consensus we have built on how we're running the system, and we reflect on that. We look at how is our system working. We reflect on it and we write it down and we say, this is how our system works. And this allows us to create alignment because then now we can look at this constitution and we can say, okay, this is how we want things to be, or this is how we not want things to be. But suddenly we have this surface area to mediate our conflicts and we can start to negotiate it. So a way to approach this is to say, first of all, we don't need to write a constitution about how the world should be. It's first of all enough to just describe how the world is and how the whole system operates. And once we can describe this and we see it, we can see, okay, does this work or is it actually stupid? Once we have written it down and look at it. Do we need to fix certain parts, or do we see we can do things better? So first of all, we describe it, and then we can propose modifications to it. And because it is a very simplified form of the whole thing, and it simplifies the complexity, we can, by changing very small steps, we can have very big impact about how we change the operations of the whole network. And the thing about a constitution is, a constitution has this implication of it is slow moving. You don't have a new constitution, state constitution every year. Typically, constitutions last like a few decades. Constitutions are dying and being replaced by other constitutions. So a constitution is not meant for infinity. It's basically just a broad consensus. But it slows down the movement because you say, okay, there are certain things we can rely on and we only need to negotiate everything else, right? And if we want to change the constitution, we make up a debate, but everyone understands the weight of this much more. So revisiting this and basically closing down, we've gone through DAOs, governance, and constitutions. DAOs are the thing that help us to create new social fabric for the world and change things. It's a tool to achieve a purpose. Governance is the brain for the thing. It allows us to do this in a competitive manner, in a manner that is effective and is efficient and that scales. And constitutions are the way how we reflect on that so that we can negotiate the whole system. That's everything I have for you today, so thank you.